Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Depressed Eeyore, and this is Evoland. Let's try to actually get this done. We've done everything. We've done all the secrets. And telling we have 4 hearts, or one of the secrets is getting a heart container. I'm assuming the last battle is going to be some sort of Zelda-esque action-adventure type thing. So we gotta go over here. Pay visit the mana tree. Zephyros, stop hiding. Show yourself. I was waiting for you. Oh dear. You finally came. Let me tell you a story. A long time ago, my people were ruling this land, but they were attacked and killed by their horns. Or killed for their horns. I'm the only survivor. And I'll take my revenge today. You shall share the same fate as the girl. The mana tree will be your graveyard. You didn't do anything? Can't switch. I can't open them in. I can't open a menu. Whoa. Okay, you gotta hit the hands. Of course, it's really hard to hit them because the freaking angle. There we go. Okay, so I can run into the hands without taking damage. I think. I did take a hit, though. Took a hit there. One hand is out. But I can't reach the other hand until he actually switches directions. Got him. Next. Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. That ain't cool. What's this? Oh, come on. You pulled back. Oh, there we go. God, what a pain. Oh my god, I don't have enough time. Yeah, I'm dead. Screw this boss. And then the problems with Clink's stupid gameplay is showing, because I can't change directions when I'm swinging. In that split second where I have to turn him to face the orb is actually what's making this rather difficult to do. Oh, come on. Oh, you might have broken my stone armor, but in this shape you cannot hit me anymore. I'll burn every part of you. I guess. Yes, I figured as much. Nope, can't do that. You know there's actual RPGs that are action-based besides Diablo, so you don't actually have to rely on an action-adventure game like Zelda. Depth perception in this game is awful. Oh wow. Yeah, I'm gonna die. During all these centuries, I have witnessed to many amazing things. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in the rain. Time for me to join my people. One hit left. You got Hero, you defeated Zephyros, and my frame rate is dropping. And that's it, credits. Alright, well, I guess I can talk about the game. So is this game worth $9? Not really. Now, I don't know, I don't think very many people are working on this game. It doesn't look like it. I think there's like only a couple of people. But the, I suppose the positives of this game is it does get me kind of thinking of various new ideas and for maybe making RPGs and maybe games in general. But as far as the game's purpose in itself and like showing like I guess a nostalgia trip of all the past things, it's or at least the past things for RPGs and I suppose adventure games, it doesn't do enough. And quite frankly, the people that made this game apparently only know of Final Fantasy and Zelda. There are some other references. There was of course a Dragon Warrior reference, but that was only a name only. There was a Mario reference because of the Zumbas, and then there was of course Dragon Ball Z. Now I could give him the benefit of the doubt and say he's basing that off the Dragon Ball Z RPGs that were out in that came out for the various systems, but I don't think that was the case. Oh, here it is. It's Legend of Zelda, Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Diablo, and many others. Oh yeah, I forgot about Diablo. Unfortunately, the thing he focused on mostly, or they focused on, 95.6%. I'm not going to bother going for 100%. It's not worth my time. But yeah, like I said, the main focus was Final Fantasy and Zelda, which kind of gives mixed signals, at least for most people who actually know that Zelda is not a RPG. I mean, the closest RPG that Zelda has is the second game, which has experience and leveling. But but even with the stuff he has, like using Final Fantasy and all that, I keep saying he, like there's only one guy working on it, but they don't do it, they use it in the most shallow way possible. There's like, I don't know if I almost feel like the game's trying to make fun of these types of genres and styles of gameplay, because it's bare bone. It's like, it's nothing. I mean, you saw the combats. Clink, until the very end of the game, only had access to attacking, and that's all he did. And then, of course, you had Karis, who had the healing spell for a while, so it's essentially just attack and heal for the rest of for the entire combat. Eventually, Karis learns a new spell, which speeds things up, but it's still not very much variety. I mean, heck, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest had more variety than this, and Final Fantasy Mystic Quest was a Final Fantasy game designed for dumb Americans. So, yeah, it was very, very shallow. I mean, even the leveling up, it was just like, hey, you get a point. It's like, okay, I mean, you could have gone a little bit further with that. You could have, shown the evolution of turn-based combat. I mean, you mentioned Dragon Warrior. You could have started things off using Dragon Warrior as your base for your turn-based combat. So instead of being on, showing everything on the side, you would show things like as a black screen and then just a monster and very limited and no animation except for flashing of damage. And you could have started with that and then evolve that into something like, you know, Final Fantasy IV, which you did, and then go into Final Fantasy VII. And once you get to things like Final Fantasy VII, or maybe even put a stage between there, you could have done something like, hey, you now have stats you can manipulate by using materia or, you know, your own little system. But it didn't do any of that. It just kept it was the exact same turn-based system. I mean, yeah, turn-based system is a system, but the reason why Final Fantasy and other games like Labyrinth of Touhou, I hold Labyrinth of Touhou in high praise, not because it was a turn-based game, but because of what it did with the turn-based combat, using the 12-party system and the change-up system. Just like a lot of people liked Final Fantasy V because of the job change system, Final Fantasy VI because of the Esper system and stat manipulation system. Final Fantasy VII had the materia system. Final Fantasy VIII had the draw system. Final Fantasy IX kind of returned to form, but it was still pretty nice. And Final Fantasy X had the swap system as well as the sphere grid system. So, but this game doesn't do any of that. It does bare minimum. And as I mentioned before, I don't think Zelda was really a good fit here. If you wanted to do like an evolution of the RPG systems, if you wanted to do an action game, something besides Diablo, there were plenty of games to choose from. You could have done Crystallis for NES, you could have done Brandish for SNES, you could have done Brain Lord, you could have done Wanderers of Ys, of pretty much any of the Wanderers of Ys series that's an action RPG. But they didn't do any of that. Instead, they stuck with Zelda, and they stuck with it for quite a while, because that's the majority of the gameplay. And I can understand why they did that, because the turn-based combat, is incredibly boring, because there's nothing to it. I mean, heck, you couldn't even use items off-screen, you didn't really have much gear to buy. I mean, I understand this is an indie title, so it had to be kind of short, but, I mean, come on, give me something. So, yeah, that's kind of my issue with it. It was just, it might as well just been called Evoland Evolution of Graphics, and even that went pretty quick. You essentially get to 3D, I got within full 3D graphics by, like, what, an hour into the game? And at that point it was essentially Final Fantasy VII graphics. And I mean, you get a few little tweaks to the graphics once you got to the next town and you did the Diablo 3, but speaking of all the freaking references, I have bruises up and down my arms because of all the wink wink nudging this game does. I thought it was very charming in the beginning, but then I realized this is all the game has, is nothing but memes and nudges of, hey, you remember this? You remember this little person looks like Eris? Hey, look, there's Zephyros. Guess what's gonna happen? I get it. It's been done. What I was interested in was seeing what they would do with the mechanics, and they didn't really do much with it. There's been some praise about the stuff about the shifting from 8-bit to 3D, but that really wasn't about shifting from 8-bit to 3D. That was a shift, that was more just a time manipulation mechanic, because all it did was adjust the size of the trees and the elevation of the square blocks, and that's all it did. I mean, it was a nice change of pace, but it kind of didn't go anywhere. Some mentions about maybe what would happen if you went out of sequence in this game. In other words, you'd purposely avoid as many chests as possible. The game actually cannot support it. If you do things like avoid smooth scrolling, your game will just start messing up very, very quickly, because the game just doesn't know how to handle it. Also, if you go with minimum graphics, you will get to the point where you'll eventually get to the point where the game will crash when you attempt to summon Bahamut, or Babamat. So, yeah, that's kind of my gist about it. I mean, sorry if I'm sounding like I'm rambling, but there's more. I mean, this is supposed to be an evolution, a story about the evolution of, like, I guess, action-adventure and RPGs, and it only references essentially 4 games, I suppose. Technically, they only reference 3. I really don't count Dragon Warrior, because the only time Dragon Warrior was mentioned was in the story. You know, that short little paragraph that you can skip over. So it was essentially just like a nostalgia trip for some guy who really liked Final Fantasy, Zelda, and I guess Diablo 3. But yeah, it just... Now, as far as like the game getting me thinking though, I mean, imagine a game where you had the option to shift between all various playstyles. Like, you can maybe build a character that was specialized in action-based combat, and then you can just go around doing action-based combat. Or you could be like, hey, there's a boss that I can't beat because my hand-eye coordination's not so good, so you shift to turn-based combat, and it'll have its own set of rules and mechanics. I mean, that stuff would have been kind of cool, if you can do something like that. Of course, I wouldn't expect it from this game, but it was kind of something I was thinking about, like, what if you could change from a action-adventure style game like Diablo and then shift back into a turn-based combat? Oh yeah, speaking of which, since the game essentially goes all the way up to Final Fantasy VIII because it does reference the card game, where's my Final Fantasy Tactics? Where's my tactical RPG gameplay? I mean, that could have been neat. Or heck, some of the military strategy type games, such as Suikoden. At least that's what I've heard it does. But anyway, that's just me on a tangent. But like I said, the shifting between the various gameplay styles could have been something very interesting to see. Like, in fact, it could have given more depth to the entire world. You could have had a small world, but you would have had to go back to previous areas with different graphic styles. That would actually change the shape and depth of the dungeon. Like, for example, in the very early games of the Game Boy, I mean, the dungeons were pretty basic, but some of these, I guess you could say mid-generation games were pretty crazy with their mechanics and stuff. You could have been like, okay, in the beginning, you had very basic graphics. It was very what you saw in the 8-bit style, and then it's like, okay, I've unlocked this graphic style now. Let's go back to this dungeon and see if it changes. And you can go back there and it'll be like a completely different dungeon with the new graphic layout and mechanics. And that could have been a way to give it a little bit more depth. But really, the game just doesn't do anything with it. And in fact, most of the cases, it just completely ignores your graphic changes. Like going back to Kefka's Cave or the Crystal Caverns and the Hidden Cave or the Village. It doesn't adjust to that. It just shifts you back to 8-bit graphics or 16-bit graphics, and then whenever you go back to whatever you're doing, you'll go back to your 3D. So the game's kind of lazy in that. It would have been nice to see a lot of some sort of mechanic that actually involves going back and forth rather than just shrinking and growing trees. So yeah, that's kind of my gist of it. It's not really worth $9, and I almost want to say it's not even worth the experience. I mean, games like To the Moon didn't have much for gameplay, but I certainly recommend playing it because of the experience itself. But this game is essentially just nothing but a nostalgia trip, with a lot of winking and nudging and, hey, remember this, and it doesn't in the worst way possible, because all it does is reference a lot of... It essentially just references character names and maybe some graphics, and doesn't really reference any of the things that matter, which was the gameplay. For those of you who think that role-playing games back in the Final Fantasy Dragon Warrior era were about the role-playing, you were sadly mistaken. The game was mostly about mechanics and number crunching, or if you want to go as early as Dragon Warrior 1, it was all about just grinding. And the game, I understand limiting the grind as much as possible, but the game just doesn't do anything with it. Like I said, the turn-based combat, eventually I just got tired of it because it wasn't doing anything. It didn't evolve from the first time it started. You level up rather slowly. The level ups don't do anything. The Diablo 3 section was kind of just it was essentially just... Actually, the Diablo 3 section was probably the most disappointing. I mean, I know Diablo 3 was a disappointing game, but essentially all they did was just take the Zelda gameplay, the action-adventure gameplay, and just added a combo system to it, and that was pretty much it. And then they changed the life bar. I mean, besides that, there wasn't really much of a change. I mean, it kind of had a slight aesthetic feel, simply because it was a lot more open rather than labyrinth-like dungeons, but it was essentially, it played exactly like the Zelda sections. And all the gear that drops was just, it didn't do anything, it was just a bunch of jokes. So, yeah, it was very kind of disappointing. I mean, you guys, I mean, I would have been less annoyed about some of this if they actually, I suppose if the evolution was a little bit slower. I mean, like I said, you got the 3D by the time you got an hour within the gameplay. I think it would have been a lot better to go a lot slower and kind of have this plot develop like that, and be like, okay, you play through the good chunk of the game in black and white, and then you play in a little bit in color, or, you know, you couldn't go through a certain section until you could see in color, and then, you know, get up to 16-bit, and then higher and higher, and then eventually get through that. And then during that process, you could have evolved the combat. You could be like, okay, you start out with very basic controls for your action-adventure type, maybe with some Crystal, and then eventually kind of evolves to something more like free roaming, kind of like Crystallis' gameplay style, or Secret of Mana. Oh yeah, where's my Secret of Mana? Jerks. But, and then for the turn-based combat, you could have started with Dragon Warrior and shifted upwards. I don't know. I guess my biggest gripes is, for one, there's more to RPGs than Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy and Diablo. And there's a lot more action-adventure games than Zelda, even back then. And they were actually pretty decent. And that's only compounded by the fact that what they did take from their history of gaming is the most shallow parts of the game. With the turn-based combat, they essentially just took the turn-based combat. You might as well just made it an auto-attack system, and you wouldn't have lost anything. So yeah, that's kind of my gripes. I mean, it was kind of charming at first, and then I realized the game was nothing but memes, and that was kind of disappointing. But hey, I got the playthrough done, which is good for you guys, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I certainly did enjoy going through it, just seeing how far the game will go with its nonsense. And I certainly don't regret buying it. I did want to see what this game was like. I think essentially what this game was, it was originally like, I guess maybe, I don't think it was a Flash game. I think it was like an entry to like an indie contest. So it was just, you know, probably like a quick sort of demo type game, and then they expanded on it. What they probably should have done was scrap their original game, what they did for the contest, and then build it from scratch using the assets they have. That way they could have made it a little bit more, I guess, evolved, and probably try to work on getting it a little bit more longevity. But hey, live and learn, I guess. Like I said, the game did get me thinking a little bit. I do think something like that can shift between turn-based and action-based combat would be kind of interesting to see in the future. Will it happen? Who knows. Anyway, what happens if I press a button? Oh, it does this. And that's that. I think that's about it. Sorry about the rambling in, but like I said, if you want to buy this game, I suggest waiting until it's on sale or something. It just doesn't have any depth to it, is the problem. I mean, some of the reviews give it a kind of, it gives it about an average score, which I suppose is a 7 nowadays. And their issue is just they kind of wanted more, and which I guess is a good thing. That the developers managed to make a game where you kind of want more, but it seems like this game didn't have more. There's been talk about them. There's already a section in the Steam forum talking about what they would want to see in an Evoland 2. I would like to see some depth and maybe some effort into the actual gameplay, because this is supposed to be an evolution of RPGs, and so far you guys have shown me nothing except evolution of graphics, and even that was rather bare-boned. So that's my suggestion. But like I said, I don't have any regrets of it, and hopefully you guys enjoyed watching. So I'm The Depressed Eeyore, this is Evoland. See you guys in the next LP.